I will be discussing PECS, or the Picture Exchange Communication System. This system is an augmentative and alternative communication program that was developed in 1985. It was developed in order to address the lack of successful communication training programs for young students with autism and for students with no functional or socially acceptable speech. Now, PECS is used for students with a wide variety of diagnoses and educational classifications. The system is unique in that it allows the student to learn how to initiate communicative act for a concrete outcome within a social context. The system is based off principles of applied behavioral analysis, or ABA. Within the PECS system, each skill is taught using specific ABA strategies. These include reinforcement strategies, error correction strategies, and generalization strategies. This system parallels typical language development in that it first teaches the student how to communicate and what the rules of communication are. The program begins by teaching the student to use single pictures to communicate their message. Then, the program teaches them to combine multiple pictures so that they can learn a variety of syntactic structures, semantic relationships, and a variety of communicative functions. This program is broken down into 6 phases, which will be discussed in the remainder of this video. Phase 1 of PECS is entitled How to Communicate. The objective of this phase is that upon seeing a highly preferred item such as a ball or cookies, the student will pick up a picture of the item on the front of their communication book, reach towards a communication partner, and release the picture of the item into the communication partner's hand. Now, the rationale behind this phase is that since the outcome involves a highly preferred item or something that the child likes, then they will be more likely to repeat the behavior of initiating communication act. So within this phase, the student learns how to communicate. They learn to approach another person, direct an action, and then receive a desired object. So the targeted sequence that is taught within this phase is pick up, reach, and release. The child is taught to pick up the picture of the preferred item, reach toward their communication partner, and release the picture of the item into the communication partner's hand. Now, this phase involves 2 teaching strategies. The first teaching strategy is a 2-person prompting system. First person being the communication partner, second person being the physical prompter. Now, the communication partner's responsibilities within this teaching strategy is to entice the student, reinforce the communication exchange within half a second, and then pair verbal praise with a tangible reinforcement, that being the ball or the cookie or the highly preferred item that the child is seeking. Now, the physical prompter's responsibilities is to wait for the student to initiate and then physically prompt the student to exchange the picture. They are not able to socially interact with the child. Their only role is to physically prompt the child. And as with any therapy system, is it important to systematically fade the prompting over time. Now, the second teaching strategy within phase 1 is backward chaining. Backward chaining involves reinforcing mastery of the last step, then the next to last step, and so on. So for example, within phase 1, the targeted sequence is pick up, reach, release. So with backward chaining, you would reinforce mastery for release, then reinforce mastery for reach, and then finally reinforce mastery for pick up. This way, it ensures that the child has mastered each step of the targeted sequence. That is phase 1. Phase 2 of PECS is entitled Distance and Persistence. The objective of this phase is to teach the student to go to their communication book, pick up a picture of a highly preferred item, go to their communication partner, get their attention, and release the picture of the item to the communication partner. Now, the rationale behind phase 2 is that it is important to teach the student to be persistent with the request if their initial communication attempt failed. By teaching persistence, we're preventing the student from abandoning the communicative act or reverting to other behaviors such as tantruming. In order to teach the child to be persistent, we have to scaffold the difficulty of the communication initiation each time. We do this by systematically fading listener and environmental prompts. The first step in phase 2 is to teach the student to go to the book, get the picture of the highly preferred item, and approach their communication partner. We teach them to persist in getting the communication partner's attention prior to exchanging the picture. Next, we teach the student to get a picture when they have something to say. This way, the student learns that they don't have to be in a specific location, in a specific setting, or with a specific person in order to use PECS. Phase 2 of PECS begins by placing a picture of a highly preferred item to the front of the child's communication book. As the teaching therapist, it is important to have different items and their corresponding pictures readily available. It is important to note that during this phase, no verbal prompts may be used. You are able to teach the child to request a variety of items by using various pictures during this phase, but it is important to teach them one item or one picture at a time. It is also important to create many opportunities for spontaneous requesting. By the end of this phase, the child should have mastered the skill of traveling to the communication book and traveling to the communication partner. In order to achieve and master this skill, it involves a variety of environmental and listener variables. These include different distances between the student and the communication book, varying distances between the student, communication book, and communication partner. It also involves using different reinforcers, different rooms, and different communication partners. The teaching strategy that is used in phase 2 is shaping. Since the skill that is to be mastered is traveling, we shape the skill of traveling by increasing the distance between the student and their communication book and the student and their communication partner. So this is accomplished by moving the book and/or partner slightly farther and farther away from the student with each presented trial. So we want to increase the distance between the student and the communication partner by at least 5 to 8 feet from the student by the end of phase 2. We also want to increase the distance between the student and the communication book. So we want the student to move from sitting in a seated position near their book to having to get up and move or walk towards their communication book. It is important to put the book in different places. You can put the book closer to the communication partner. You can have the book on the opposite side of the room, but the ultimate goal is for the student to travel to the communication book and travel to their communication partner in order to initiate their communication interaction. This also involves the skill of persistence that was taught at the beginning of phase 2. So by the end of phase 2, we want our student to be able to travel specific distances to their book and their communication partner, as well as persist in their communication exchange. That is phase 2. Phase 3 of PECS is entitled Picture Discrimination. This phase is broken down into 2 subparts, phase 3A and phase 3B, which will be discussed at a later time. The overall objective of phase 3 is that the student requests desired items by going to the communication book, selecting the desired item from an array of pictures. Then they proceed to go to their communication partner and request the desired item by placing the picture of the item into the communication partner's hand. Now, the rationale behind this phase is that the student has already learned the power of communication and that they are acting within a social context to impact somebody else's behavior. This phase is accomplished through discrimination training. discrimination training teaches the student their specific consequences to exchanging one picture versus another picture. The discrimination training portion of Phase 3 initially teaches the child to discriminate between a picture of a highly preferred item and a picture of a non-preferred item. This allows the student to learn that by exchanging a specific picture, they are gaining access to a preferred item, while exchanging a different picture results in them gaining access to something that they do not like. This makes the consequences of picture exchange more meaningful to the student. It is important that the therapist learns what items or activities are highly motivating or non-preferred for the child. During this phase of training, the therapist will place a picture of a highly preferred item, such as a ball, and a picture of a non-preferred item, such as crackers, on the front of the communication book. The student will learn that by exchanging the picture of the ball, they will receive access to the ball. They will learn that if they select the picture of the non-preferred item, such as the crackers, they will gain access to the crackers. This will allow the child to learn that in order to gain access to the highly preferred item, they will need to exchange that specific picture. Discrete trial instruction is used during Phase 3. This instruction begins by having the trainer place 2 pictures on the communication book and enticing the student with the items that are available. The student then responds by selecting one picture and handing it to the communication partner. The consequence of this instruction is that the student receives the requested item. There's a short pause before the next presentation or trial. The student will then, in that time, consume or play with the requested item. The first part of Phase 3 is Phase 3A, or discriminating between a highly preferred picture and a distractor picture. The distractor picture often represents a picture of a non-preferred item. You begin by presenting 2 items and their corresponding pictures. One item that the student really likes and another item that the student does not like. You entice the student and wait for their response. You begin praise as soon as they begin to reach for the correct picture. The closer in time that the reinforcement is delivered to the targeted response, the greater the strengthening effect of the reinforcer. So it is important to reinforce as soon as the correct picture is selected. If the correct picture is not selected and the picture of the non-preferred item is selected, then an error correction sequence will need to be initiated. If the incorrect picture or non-preferred item is selected by the child, it is necessary to use the error correction sequence. This sequence involves 4 parts: model, practice, switch, and repeat. You first model the appropriate response by tapping or showing the child the target picture. Then you practice by holding your hand open near the targeted picture, and you can then physically or gesturally prompt the child to give you the correct picture. Once they give you the correct picture, you are allowed to praise them, but do not give them the item. You then switch by distracting the child with a high five or by clapping your hands in order to reset the trial. You then repeat the trial by enticing the child with both items, having them select the correct picture, providing them with the item, and then giving them praise for selecting the correct picture of the highly preferred item. Once Phase 3A has been completed and the child is able to discriminate between highly preferred and non-preferred items, then the child is ready for Phase 3B, or discriminating between pictures of 2 highly preferred items. The therapist begins by presenting 2 pictures, both of highly reinforcing items. In order to check if the student is selecting the correct picture during this phase, we use what is called a correspondence check. Once the student hands you the picture of the item, you hold both items up and instruct them by saying, "Go ahead, take it," but you do not say the names of the items. During the correspondence check, if the child reaches for the correct item, you will reinforce them immediately with verbal praise and allow them to take the item. If they reach for the incorrect item, you block access to it and use the error correction procedure. You model, practice, switch, and repeat. You model by pointing or tapping the correct picture. You practice by holding your hand open near the target picture or physically gesturally prompt the child to give you the correct picture. Then you switch or distract the child by giving them a high five or clapping your hands. Then you repeat by enticing the child again with both items. Have them giving you the correct picture of the highly preferred item. You would then do a correspondence check again by holding both items up and saying, go ahead, take it, and allowing them access and praise if they select the correct item, the item that matches the picture that they gave you. Discrimination training in Phase 3 ends when the child is able to discriminate between 5 pictures. The final step in discrimination training is to teach the student to go into their book to look for a specific picture of a highly preferred item. Picture discrimination and discrimination training are all part of Phase 3. Phase 4 of PECS is entitled Sentence Structure. The objective of this phase is that the student will be able to request present and non-present items using a multi-word phrase. So the goal of Phase 4 is that the student will go to their communication book, pick the picture of I want, place it on the sentence strip, then select the picture of the wanted item, place it on the sentence strip, remove the sentence strip from their book, approach a communication partner, and give the sentence strip to the communication partner. At the end of this phase, students should typically have 20 or more pictures in their book and be communicating with a variety of partners. Phase 4 is that it is necessary to teach our students 2 very important skills. The first being a new communicative function, and the second being a way to mark the new communicative function or original communicative function as either a request or comment. We do this by teaching our students to use a simple phrase or sentence starter, such as I want, I see, or it is, in order for their messages to be interpreted correctly. We also teach our students to use the phrase I want by combining multiple pictures. Now, during Phase 4, we are not teaching our students the concepts of pronouns, such as I versus he or she. Therefore, it is not important to teach them separately. Materials that are used in Phase 4 include a sentence strip that is attached to the communication book, an I want picture, reinforcing objects and their corresponding pictures. It is important to note that during Phase 4, no verbal prompts are used. In order to teach sentence strip construction, we use the teaching strategy of backward chaining. Just as a reminder, backward chaining is where mastery of the last step is reinforced first, then the next to last step, and so on. And as with all PECS phases, we need to create opportunities for spontaneous requesting during functional activities. And following from Phase 3, during Phase 4, we continue with correspondence checks when adding new vocabulary to the student's communication book. The targeted sequence for Phase 4 is as follows. First, the student will go to the communication book. Second, they will remove the I want picture from their book and place it on the sentence strip. Next, they will select the picture of the highly reinforcing item that they wish to request from their book and place it on the sentence strip. Then, they will remove the sentence strip from their book, approach their communication partner, and give them the sentence strip. In order for the student to learn the targeted sequence of Phase 4, we teach them the sequence in steps. First, we teach the student to place the picture of the highly reinforcing item on their sentence strip. Then, we teach the student to add I want. Now, if the student reaches for the reinforcing item prior to placing I want on the sentence strip, we block them from doing so and physically or gesturally prompt them to remove the picture of I want from their communication book and place it on the sentence strip. Then, we respond to the student by reading the sentence strip. We turn the sentence strip towards them and physically prompt them to point to each picture as we read each picture to them. Now, during this phase, it is okay to say no to the student's request. Initially, and in earlier phases, we would try to honor as many requests as possible in order for the student to learn the new behavior of communicating. However, in phase 4, it is okay to say no, and instead, we can offer alternatives, we can teach them to wait, we can tell them not right now, or we can use a visual schedule to schedule access to that highly reinforcing item. Following the completion of phase 4, we teach the student to use attributes. This includes incorporating an attribute icon onto their sentence strip and helps them learn the concept of sentence expansion. We teach the student to use a variety of attribute icons and combine them to formulate sentences that are 3 or more icons in length. Attributes that can be used include color, big, little, shape, and long or short. We learn what attributes are important to the child through a series of steps. We determine what attributes are important to the child through a series of steps. In the first step, we have the child construct a 3-picture sentence without discriminating between the icons. In the second step, we teach the student to discriminate between high preference or low preference attribute icons. In the third step, we have the student discriminate between 2 or more examples of a preferred item. So for example, I want red, blue, or orange candy. In the fourth step, we increase the complexity of the attribute discrimination task by adding more attributes. In the fifth step, we introduce additional exemplars for a particular attribute. So for example, instead of blue candy, we could teach the student to use the color for different items such as markers, juice, or blocks. Phase 5 is entitled Responding to the Question, What do you want? The objective of this phase is that the student will be able to spontaneously request a variety of items as well as answer the question, What do you want? It is important that we do not forget about spontaneous requesting during this phase. Although we are teaching the student 2 new skills of answering and commenting, we still need to create as many opportunities as possible for the student to spontaneously request items. The teaching strategy that is used in phase 5 is delayed prompting. This is a delay between the presentation of the natural cue, which is the question, What do you want? And the helping prompt. In this case, the helping prompt is when the trainer points to or touches the sentence starter, I want. Now this delay between the natural cue and the helping prompt gets longer and longer after each successive trial until the student is able to independently perform the behavior in advance of the helping prompt. During phase 5, we teach the student to answer the question, What do you want? Through a series of steps. In the first step, we implement a 0-second delay between presentation of the natural cue, that is the question, What do you want? And the helping prompt. In the next step, we increase the delay interval between the presentation of the natural cue and the helping prompt. It's important to increase this delay by 1 to 2 seconds over a series of trials. In the third step, we switch between responsive requesting and spontaneous requesting in order to determine if the child is providing an appropriate response to the different types of requests. The final phase of PECS, phase 6, is titled Commenting. The objective of this phase is that the student will be able to answer the questions, What do you want? What do you see? What do you have? What do you hear? And what is it? As well as be able to spontaneously request for items and comment. By the end of phase 6, the student should be able to demonstrate both responsive and spontaneous commenting. These skills are taught using the teaching strategy of delayed prompting. In delayed prompting, there are varying delay intervals between the presentation of the natural cue, that is, the question being asked, and the helping prompt. During phase 6, we teach the child responsive or spontaneous commenting through a series of steps. In the first step, we teach the child to answer the comment question. We do this by structuring the session a particular way. We create environmental events that may be novel, violate the child's expectations, or that may be surprising or startling to the child. These can include things such as a mystery bag or box with familiar objects, looking through pictures of familiar items, going for a walk, or watching a familiar TV show. Now, during this phase, we only provide social reinforcement or social praise such as, yes, that is a ball, when the child selects the correct picture. The second step is that we teach the child to discriminate between sentence starters. We do this by placing 2 different sentence starters on the front of their communication book. We begin by asking them one question, such as, what do you see? And then ask them another question, such as, what do you want? During successive trials. Now, as soon as the student reaches for the correct sentence starter, we provide them with social praise and feedback. Once they exchange the strip, we provide them with the appropriate social praise if they're commenting, or the tangible reinforcement if they're requesting. The third step is maintenance of spontaneous requesting. In this step, we allow the student to continue spontaneously requesting for a variety of items. In the fourth step, we create opportunities for the student to spontaneously comment. In the fifth and final step of Phase 6, we teach the student additional comments such as, it is, I have, and I hear. Once the student has completed this step, they have completed the final phase of PECS, Phase 6.